So let's move on to Scarlet Colored Glasses. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we talk about all things Husker football, and we'll start with some tweets of the week. Honky, you want to run through these?
Yeah, absolutely. The first one, just real quick, this was from CFB Home, and this is very reminiscent of the public service announcement that producer Skip put together, suit, stay off of Twitter. But it says, this is your only reminder for the season before I call you out. Don't tweet at recruits when they decommit, and if you do, only wish them luck. Don't tweet at recruits daily to come to your team. Don't tweet at players blaming the loss on them. There is 60 minutes in football. That's from CFB Home, and we approve that message.
These guys are getting paid now. I'm sorry. Get over yourselves. You guys wanted the money. I'm sorry. If they get blasted on Twitter, well, so be it. It's cool. It's cool. It's what you wanted. It's what you wanted. I wouldn't do it, but let's not act like they're innocent students just there to get an education and play a game now.
Well, I mean,
some are getting paid.
Mac, do you feel any different bucks. If it's somebody who's not getting paid any money to play?
I do. I feel if these were just purely students playing a game for the university, I feel that's a more of a protected class than if you're now getting endorsed from big bucks.
What if it's a poor right guard who isn't getting any NIL and he misses the block that gets the tackle on the quarterback who is making the big money? I mean, do you blame the
better he'd get made? You
know? Do we make fun of the right guard who's not making any money?
I mean, no, at that point you go to the coaches and say, why don't we have a better right guard that's getting paid? So
there's a reason we don't put Mac's Twitter handle up on this.
There is a reason. There's 100%
reason. Next up, this is the Ireland tweet here. And we already have some photos here we're going to show, but Redcasters in Ireland this week, we want to see your photos, tag us, and we'll show as many as we can on next week's Redcast. And I can tell you right now, guys, we have some Redcasters in Ireland that have some Redcast swag. So I think we'll see a few photos of that next week.
International.
That's but awesome. For right now, Kaylee, she sent us a boatload of them. So I mean, I picked the best 6 I could find for right now. But here's a photo of the Nebraska Northwestern sign there with the helmets and everything. Chapel Lizard. I don't know. I brought that up for Boomer. I just figured he'd like that. That looks like a pond or something. I don't know. Here's a church of Guinness. Yeah. So, I mean, looks like beautiful land and everything. The people out there.
It's a beautiful country.
And people seem to be having a blast.
In an old church. And if you've ever been to Europe before, you'll know that there's a lot of old churches in Europe. That's for sure. So
a lot of old churches. And Dave, the last part of the tweets of the week here. These 3 here. First one is from who is it? Let me look here. Todd Lisenby. And it was on Stuart Mandel. He has NU and OU both losing a non-conference game. And this turned into a whole thing today because it was that he had us going 4-8 and them going 7-5. But the way the records were, it's like everybody had to lose a game in non-conference. And so we tagged College Football Professor and College Football Matrix, who they said, if you lose an FCS game, you're just in trouble, period. And basically Mandel was saying that, flying back from Ireland, that it would be kind of a trap game playing North Dakota. And Adam McClintock responded, you can count what happens if you lose an FCS game. You can count out a bowl game. To be fair, I think Stewart got his North Dakota schools confused. And then Dave Bartu responded that, if you have us going 4-8, how many trap games do you possibly have us in? How do you have trap games if you're 4-8?
Right. Which, what's this momentum?
You are the trap game. Like at that point, like if you're 4-8 team, you are the trap game for other teams at that point.
It does show the wide spectrum of predictions for this Nebraska team. Mm-hmm. Stuart Mandel, well-respected national media type, who does take these predictions pretty seriously. He goes through every year and tries to do it, and he'll predict against the spread during the week, and saying 4-8. Colin Cowherd, national media, who gets paid millions of dollars by Fox.
Not
and
respected,
others.
though. Not respected.
Not respected.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's a big deal, but maybe not as respected. Sure, but he listens to a lot of people that are respected. He doesn't do all the homework that Stewart does. Has Nebraska number 8 in the country. And so there's
seems high.
Opposite. Well, I mean, he is buying into the hype, and
but where's the hype coming from?
Well, even Adam McClintock, your college football professor, who we had on, and he has his own metrics and everything. In previous years, he'll have us going, 5-7 or 6-6 when other people have us higher. This year, he has us at 8-4, and that's according to his metrics. So the non-biased metrics right now. Next up here is from Eric, and he goes, and Boomer, you sent this one to me. I think this is good. Or was this? No. You sent the last one. But anyways, it doesn't matter. Historical take on the 2022 predictions. In the last 50 years, 79 coaches have entered year 5 without a winning season in years 1 through 4. How well did they do in year 5? 0 had 9+ wins. 2 had 8 wins. 9 had 7 wins. 7 had 6 wins. 61 had 5 wins or less. So that's what Coach Frost going into year 5 is stepping into. I'm all about, I know the Redcast is all about making history here. So, but you see that it does show, at least historically speaking, where we're at going into year 5 with what Coach Frost has done. Now, I think we'd also say our 5 years are unique. I think it's unique what he took over. It's unique to have the COVID year in there. I'm not saying every other school had to deal with the same COVID and all that we did. I'm just saying when you're taking our 5 years to someone's 5 years, 20 years ago, it's not the same necessarily. Right. But
yeah, I think that is kind of what when Trev was referring to, the statistics or the metrics, say this probably isn't going to work, but it might, when he had that comment last year. That's kind of what he was referring to. That's Stu Manji is the one who put together that big sheet last year of all the breakdown of how coaches have done over the years. That started, Owen had losing seasons the first 4 years or 5 years or whatever it was. So, again, the numbers are what they are, but there are exceptions to it, and why the hell not be an exception? So.
Yeah, and that's the beauty.
How many of them went through a pandemic in 2 of those years, and all the others?
So Mac, you're asking where is the hype coming from? So the anti-hype is that right there, right? I mean, if you look at like these trends over 50 years on generic teams. No one turns around a team in year 5, right? It just doesn't happen, right? Almost, right? I mean, there's been, I think he followed that up. Greg Schiano was one of the guys that actually got to a bowl in year 5, that type of stuff, right? Pretty limited number of coaches. Kevin Wilson in Indiana did that, and he got fired, right? But very limited. So that's where Stuart Mandel is at. I was like, look, I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. You got to prove it to me. I mean, Scott Frost is a walking joke to some national media members at this point, right? They just think he's a disaster. But then the hype, and I know you guys don't listen to a lot of the national podcasts or a lot of betting podcasts, but that I do. And those guys are like a college football professor, right? Who use metrics on a year-over-year basis. And they look at the anomaly that was last year, and you look at all the stats, and they tell you Nebraska wasn't a 3-9 team last year. They were an 8-4 team essentially. And they look at that, and you look at where that 7.5 number came for our win total in Vegas, and it stayed there. Actually, they've moved the juice around, but it's still 7.5. And you have some national betting experts predicting Nebraska to win the West because they just think they're the better team, right? I mean, so it's out there, Well,
yeah, and schedules play a role in this too, and
they absolutely they love the schedule. Some of these guys think that we'll be favored in every game except Michigan, right?
Even Trev last night on Big Red Wrap Up last night, Trev was interviewed by Michael Severe, and Trev even made reference to the schedule that at least it plays nice for us. Now at the end of the day, you have to take advantage of any benefits that the schedule gives you. I mean, we can go out and lose to Northwestern. We can go out and lose to North Dakota, like Stuart Mandel says it, right? We can't you can't look past any team on the schedule, but the schedule plays itself out nicely that if we play clean football, I think we're in position to win a lot of games if we do that. If we fumble the ball around and do things like we did against Illinois, we can lose a lot of games, like we did last year. So the last tweet there, and this is the one that Boomer sent me, and this is amazing. This is from Tony Gerdeman. Saban's non-conference road record at Bama's, it's nuts. He goes, amazingly, Nick Saban has never lost a non-conference road game in his 15 years at Alabama. If they win at Texas this season, he will move to an incredible 3-0. 3-0. Okay, Boomer, explain that to the Redcast.
Yeah, what he's referring to is a true non-conference road game. We were actually going to play a game at a campus site of the opposing school. And as you kind of see there, they tend to play their big non-conference games again, in convenient neutral locations like, say, Atlanta or New Orleans, places like that for the most part. So it's been a long time since they played a whole lot of non-con games off-site at a real opponent stadium. And yeah, that certainly, I think, has helped. So.
Do we know the other two victories?
They went to Penn State a few years ago. I remember that game. The other one off the top of my head, I don't know. I can find out for us here shortly. But
yeah. Well,
there hasn't been many, as you can tell. So,
and to Boomer's point there, Dave, think of Oregon, Georgia this year at neutral site Chick-fil-A game in Atlanta. It's Oregon against Georgia, but it's not a home game for Georgia. They have a shorter drive than Oregon has a flight, but it's a neutral site game. So remember, the SEC is the best conference in the country, though, and we'll never see an SEC team playing up north ever. That doesn't happen. Not in November or December. You'll never see those teams playing in the snow
until we get a playoff.
They play until you get an expanded playoff. I'm more into an expanded playoff with home games for the higher seeds. I'm more into that than I've ever been before because it just gets to be ridiculous. You have 8-team schedules for conference in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Your big non-conference game is a neutral site game that's 5 minutes away from your home. You're playing Murray State in the middle of November. All those things that the SEC has done and championed, and good for them. I mean, it's worked
all
for them.
Done to game the system to get multiple playoff teams, and they've done a great job at it.
Yep. I mean,
good.
Alabama and Georgia, Nebraska just got done playing Ohio State 6 straight years from the other division. How often do Alabama and Georgia play in season against each other?
I think about once every time Neptune goes around the sun. Last time I looked. So yeah.
Now that could change. I mean, we don't need to talk about SEC, but they have talked about the 3-6-6 model where they actually change their schedule and go to 9 games. And if it's all about money these days and TV contracts, the Big Ten has shown the value of playing more good in-season games. And Alabama, Georgia, just like a Michigan, Ohio State, would bring huge value to a TV contract. And the SEC, if there's a different playoff out there, would reconsider that because then they wouldn't feel like they're going to get punished for a loss.
And they did start to change up their scheduling model. We started noticing it a few years ago, and it takes a few years when you start, you're scheduling 3-4 years out. But I know Alabama is doing this home and away with Texas. They have one coming up with Wisconsin. Other schools are doing the same thing. So I think they are going away a little bit more from the model, but you still see this Georgia, Oregon crap from this year.
Texas is a conference game now.
Yeah, well, Texas is going to be a conference. That's true. But you mentioned the expanding conference there, Dave. Rob, do you have something there?
I was going to say, with Dave talked about expanding conference and TV contracts. So would this be a good time to talk about that? Was going to be my question, but I muted myself, and so that's embarrassing.
Yes, Rob, you're correct. That's a good statement, Rob. That we haven't actually chatted too much about or at all about the Big Ten TV contracts, which Boomer I think is around $8 billion over a 7-year period. Which will take effect in 2023. And that is obviously including USC and UCLA joining the conference in 2024. A unique thing about this is that Kevin Warren looks really smart and has played at least 3 of the national broadcasters to pair them together. Fox, obviously, who is been a partner with the Big Ten now for well over a decade and owns 61% of the Big Ten network. We'll have a majority of the games, but key partners with exclusive time slots with CBS going in the afternoon game that used to be the SEC game of the week, and NBC having Saturday night Big Ten football, which they'll probably brand a similar notion of Sunday night football. Both of them paying around $350 million or more for games over those 7 years. Rob.
Well, I was going to say that one of the things I read today, I think it was just this morning, was that we want to talk about Kevin Warren being smart. And I know that this is, some people's heads are going to explode saying that, but there's literal clauses in these contracts too, where if Notre Dame joins, everything goes back to kind of the negotiation table, right? Where the amount of money changes because bringing in Notre Dame obviously has a monetary value there. So there's actually, I forget what you call those kind of clauses.
Escalator
clauses.
Yeah.
Thank you. there's escalator clauses in there for Notre Dame if they do decide to join the conference. So all those people out there saying no way Notre Dame would ever join the Big Ten because, they're worth too much on their own. Well, this is basically saying like, well, yeah, we understand their worth. And in the event that they join the Big Ten, we're going to take that into consideration.
Yeah. And that is true. My understanding is that the contracts that are written, there's specific escalators for Notre Dame. So they actually have a monetary value attached to what Notre Dame would bring in and how that would increase the TV payout. So that's something, if the Big Ten is interested in pursuing Notre Dame, they have actual figures to present to them. If any other programs join in, then everything can just be kind of renegotiated. So if other programs, get brought in, then it can be done. But yeah, the Notre Dame end of it, there's a number already set in the TV deal as it is.
Yeah. And so that actually brings us that graphic that we had up is like, how do we get to 20 teams? I mean, Notre Dame is one possible answer to those 4 question marks, even though it does seem like that Notre Dame is being pretty patient here and doesn't seem like they're going to jump at that opportunity. It's interesting just because the Big Ten now is becoming a partner with NBC, which is Notre Dame's NBC partner. Now you're going to see Notre Dame games in the afternoon, for example, leading into a Big Ten primetime game on NBC. Mm-hmm. So you have cross promotions there. You may see some value in Notre Dame scheduling more Big Ten teams again, opposed to not, right? They only have one Big Ten team on their schedule. In past years, they used to play Michigan State, Purdue, Michigan every single year practically, right? And so they were practically a mini member of the Big Ten for decades with how many Big Ten teams they would play. So that'll be interesting how it plays out. What we're hearing though is that outside of the Notre Dame escalation clause and the possibility to grow that $8 billion to $10 billion or more, is that so Kevin Warren has a interview on HBO's Real Sports with Brian Gumbel, where he talks about he could see the Big Ten going to 20 teams, that it's likely that we're going to continue to expand. He's had interviews with Dennis Dodd at CBS Sports that says the same thing. And those expansion talk is a little bit different, right? It's more about adding those Pac-12 schools that have been rumored, right? It's about Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal. So those might be the 4 more logical answers to these 4 question marks in the near term. Brett McMurphy, who always seems to have the insider knowledge, it was on one of the local radio shows last week. He said he would guarantee that those 4 schools are in the Big Ten before the next TV contract in 2030, and it thinks it's more likely that they are in the Big Ten within 2 years. And that's where it's really interesting to me, and how smart Kevin Warren and or the Big Ten is. Maybe it's Jim Delaney still, I don't know. But there is a 4th window of TV, right? It's the Pac-12 After Dark window that the Big Ten hasn't filled yet, per se. And you could add on to your existing contracts or go back to market for a 4th window and bring in ESPN or a streaming service and have them pay $350 million more for an extra window of games that just adds on to what you've already done with CBS, NBC, and Fox.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
You need that extra inventory by adding those 4 teams, and that's how they actually have the value. So the Big Ten just has played this perfectly, I think.
Yeah. And you think about the networks that we've gotten tied in with now, Fox, NBC, and CBS, who basically runs NFL. It's Fox, CBS, and NBC. All those, all those. Okay, Dave, I think we're losing Dave here for a sec, but those networks there are the ones that run NFL. So the cross promotion between NFL, here we go. The cross promotion between NFL and the Big Ten can be huge in this future promotion that we can have here. I'm interested, one thing with Redcasters that are following along here. I'm interested, send us, who do you think the 4 teams are? Obviously you have Notre Dame as one of them, but who are some of the other names that you see? And we'll put them up there on the screen. Jeremy Brandt there, Notre Dame, Oregon, Washington, Stanford. I think Oregon and Washington make a ton of sense, obviously, to get West Coast. Notre Dame is your top one. And then what will be interesting, I think Ken McCone, Yeah, he had talked about the rumors there of the state of California preventing UCLA. UCLA is in the same university system as Cal, and their board of regents have had some issues with UCLA leaving the way that they have. And so does that make Cal more attractive to the conference if that kind of helps it secure that? I don't know.
Do you throw a bone to Cal just to get the regents to sign off on it? Definite possibility. And, people talk about the Pac-12 like that, what those teams add per se, not necessarily a lot, on their own, but like everyone was saying, they do bring that Pac-12 window to it, that after dark. And it does give USC and UCLA, I guess what you want to call it, partners kind of in their time zone for scheduling for, games. Otherwise, for both football, basketball, and the Olympic sports. Because if you think about it otherwise, that's a lot of travel for a lot of schools, especially those two. So it does kind of make some sense to look to the Pac-12. And, and the issue with Notre Dame, how tied in are they to those ACC media rights? That whole contract, which I'm still amazed anyone in the ACC signed a few years ago when they signed away their media rights to 2087 or whatever the hell it was. I mean, I don't know how they convinced anyone to sign those away. But, there's always ways around that. That's what all those big lawyers are for. And so even if it is a possibility that the Big Ten would add, 4 Pac-12 schools, in a few years, if, North Carolina and Notre Dame want to join the Big Ten, would we not expand to 22? I'm pretty sure they would. So there's going to be a lot to this. And like Dave said, the part of the brilliance of this TV deal we had, our TV deal, the Big Ten's TV deal is up again before the ACC's current one is up. So we'll have negotiated it twice before the ACC's is even done. So just the amount of money it's going to be worth in 7 years or so is going to be crazy. So Big Ten's played this whole TV deal very well. So
I'm back. You guys can hear me okay?
There you go, Dave's back. We can hear you.
Yep. You look good.
Hopefully you got my entire soliloquy there. I thought I really hit it. So
yeah.
But
it was weird. It was like watching what was that movie with like the cameras where they were out the Blair
Witch Project? It was the question. Did you hear
not as much, but it was like watching the Blair Witch Project on our own screens and down there with the camera moving around.
So scared.
All right. Well, I'll have to listen back and see what you guys actually heard. But,
we didn't hear much, honestly.
No, we got you.
You were muted. Thank you.
It was all there. I just wish whatever's going to happen would get over with.
Yeah.
And just be done with it. Like, stop playing games. Let's get to the conferences and just so we can start having some traditions develop again. It's also in flux right now. I don't know. I don't know. There's all these trends in college football, and it's just kind of weird to get a handle on them.
I would end with to Boomer's point about the ACC. I mean, the ACC comes up in 2034, I think, or some crazy thing like that. I mean, the grant of rights over there is a pretty solid situation. It's really hard for them to get out of that without forking over an immense amount of money. It's really up to the conference, right? And actually dissolving the ACC, all that type of stuff really isn't likely. All right? There's a whole, you ever read Frank the Tank Slant? You can go check it out. He's got a pretty good description. But the key there is that by 2030, that's when the window starts to get open for those ACC schools, because now they only have like 4 years, right? And of giving up their grant of rights to the ACC. And if they're only making $40 million still in 2030, and you could join the Big Ten and make 140, and you don't care about giving $40 million back to the ACC for 4 years. You're like, that's fine. I'm going to make more money anyway. I mean, that's the rumor with Oregon right now, is that they would only make 30 some million maybe if they're in the Pac-12. They're happy to take less from the Big Ten for the first 5 years, right?
And maybe Oregon could find some booster. It's got a few spare pennies to shell out for something like that. It's possible. There might be one or two.
I can think of one.
I could think of one or two.